I want to talk about America's Southeast, still struggling to pick up the pieces following Hurricane Helene. And now they've got this new massive threat. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this. This hurricane is huge. Hurricane Milton has intensified rapidly in the Gulf of Mexico, becoming a, quote, potentially catastrophic Category 5 storm. Now, remember, this is a Category 5 storm. Katrina was a 3 when it made landfall. This is a whopper of a hurricane. The storm is making its way east towards Florida with 160-mile-an-hour winds, expected to make landfall late Wednesday on the state's Gulf Coast there. Republicans and Democrats have responded to this Cat 5 storm very different ways, while Trump and his MAGA allies are spreading conspiracy theories about immigrants stealing aid money and liberals controlling the weather. The Biden-Harris administration is doing everything it can to spread the word about this disaster to come. So we don't want to play with this. We want to give you the facts and give you the truth. So we have so much to discuss. I'm glad to be joined by a fantastic returning guest. It's Brian Shapiro, a longtime political commentator and the host of the radio show Pushing the Limits. Brian, thank you so much. Where can we get you, just so people know if they're seeing you here?
Yeah,
you are from Las Vegas, correct?
Yes, correct. And thanks again for having me on, Don. I appreciate it. At PTL Radio Show on YouTube, and of course my website, pushingthelimits.live. I'm also on FMAM Radio here in Las Vegas, but X and YouTube at PTL Radio Show, where we go live there as well, just like you do on YouTube. So
all right,
thank
great.
you again for having me on, Don.
Thank you. Let's talk about this because this is life-threatening. You got the surges are expected to hit Florida's coast this week with an arrival of Hurricane Milton, which strengthened Monday to a Category 5, as I said. Maximum sustained winds about 160 miles an hour. I want to give you an update just how bad this is. This is a veteran meteorologist. Can't get my lips to work today, but you know, one of those days. John Morales becoming emotional just about how big this storm is and the danger of it. Watch, everyone.
An incredible, incredible, incredible hurricane. It has dropped. It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific. Maximum sustained winds are 160 miles per hour, and it is just gaining strength in the Gulf of Mexico, where you can imagine the winds. I mean, the seas are just so incredibly, incredibly hot. Record hot, as you might imagine. You know what's driving that. I don't need to tell you. Global warming, climate change, leading to this and becoming an increasing threat for the Yucatan, including Mérida and Progreso and other areas there. Let's see if I can show you the latest. There's the Cat 5 information. Winds 160 miles per hour, moving east-southeast at 9 miles per hour. And on that track, you're going to notice that this system is going to come very, very close to the Yucatan. And the dirty side of this hurricane, folks, is on the right-hand side of its progress.
Pay attention to that. The dirty side.
They're going to get the dirty side there. These communities, many of them, as you might imagine, many folks, you know, in that area have just the very basics, nothing else but that. So it's going to be very tough. Now let's transition to Florida because even though it is expected to weaken on approach, it is so incredibly strong right now that you're going to find it very difficult for it to be nothing less than a major hurricane when it makes landfall in Florida.
Okay, so Brian, we know our meteorologists are trained to, it's just the facts for those guys. This is a veteran meteorologist who's talking about this. There will be widespread evacuations throughout the state of Florida. As many as 15 million people are under flood watches across the Florida Peninsula. 11 million are at risk of tropical tornadoes. So you have this veteran meteorologist giving the facts straight, and yet you have Republican lawmakers spreading conspiracies that Democrats are controlling the weather to destroy GOP voting communities. In fact, it was reported earlier today that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is refusing to take calls from President Biden or Vice President Harris The issue was discussed at today's White House briefing. We'll get to that in a moment. Why are they playing politics with something this damn deadly? It's embarrassing and sad and beneath the dignity of any politician.
Don, this is the same kinds of people that lied about Springfield, Ohio. They're eating the cats and the dogs. These are the same people that lie about the 2020 election. They don't care. All they care about is scoring political points. And here you have a bunch of innocent people, sadly, that have lost their lives. Families are grieving. They've lost their homes. They've literally lost everything. And then Donald Trump and his base of supporters are lying about FEMA. When we know, and I hate to bring politics into this, but Donald Trump has done this. They're lying, and Trump is the guy who capped it at $500 for FEMA. Most Republicans want to abolish FEMA altogether, but yet they're the ones that want to say that Joe Biden is on the beach. They're the ones that want to say that Kamala Harris is the one that's campaigning. Joe Biden put some of this forth and started this before this first hurricane even got there. And you have Republican governors that are thanking the administration that say they, quote, have everything they need. Now, that doesn't mean that everything's perfect. That doesn't mean that more can be done. But, Don, I'm not surprised that so many of these people on the far right are doing this. And I got to tell you, that video that you just played, I've never seen anything like that before. I mean, that's really unbelievable, but rightfully so. His emotions, we're all emotional. That means this is more, there are more innocent people that are going to lose their lives. And can Trump just shut up? Can he just stop talking about the Biden administration for 5 seconds? Stop showing up to these events or, throwing out paper towels. Remember when he did that? Can you just stop making it about you for a couple days at least and let these people get through this horrific tragedy and let Joe Biden do his job?
Mm-hmm. Brian, I couldn't agree with you more. And the reason I said, I want to discuss more about what you said, but the reason I said watch when he said the dirty side of the hurricane. Now, I'm from Louisiana. I covered Katrina. I was in Pass Christian in Mississippi. And then later, after the hurricane, I went home to Louisiana to tour the damage, even with my mom. We did a road tour. We went around. When they say the dirty side of the hurricane, that's the most destructive side. And what he's saying is that it's not when the hurricane initially hits. It is the storm surge that comes behind the hurricane, because Katrina was a 3, but that storm sat there in the Gulf of Mexico and it built, and the water and the surge behind it. And that's what came in and inundated New Orleans. And that's what that meteorologist is saying is going to come in and inundate Florida, because the winds come. If the hurricane is moving, right? If it's not stalled, it'll be destructive, but it keeps moving. At least it gets out of the way. Yeah. When the hurricane installs like that, that means it's whipping up the water. And what is that? Floodwaters. You cannot get away from that floodwaters. You are stuck. Right. They're telling people to get out. And yet you have these people lying for political purposes on exactly what is FEMA doing. Oh, FEMA's terrible. They're not doing their jobs. They are doing their jobs. Right. That $750, that cap that you said, that's higher than the cap that Trump gave. Trump took money away from FEMA to pay for the border wall that Mexico never paid for. And now they're complaining about the funding for FEMA. And he's been trying to get Mike Johnson to get people to come back into Washington, right, to vote on giving more money for these victims and for emergency services. And they won't, like Ron DeSantis, which we'll get to, they don't care. They're on a break.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Don.
It's Republicans who won't fund it.
Yeah, you're right. And to make matters even worse, a lot of these MAGA Republicans make it sound like this is the only payment they're going to get. Let's keep in mind that this is only step one. This is only step one in the process. These are the funds that they can get immediately. For example, you can get up to $45,000 for a home. There are other steps in the process. This is the first immediate step, which is $750. And if you listen to Donald Trump, he'll make it sound like, and sadly, many of his supporters believe every word he says, this is the only payment they're going to get. Again, that is a complete lie and a mistruth, and it needs to be called out. And I'm glad, people like you are doing this, and it's important. And here are people, Joe Biden said it best, didn't he, Don? There are people that are struggling and suffering, and Trump is making it worse. He's making it worse, making it sound like the administration is doing nothing. Haven't these people been through enough already? But Trump doesn't care. He doesn't care.
He doesn't. I don't know if you saw that rally this weekend. Man, what a doozy. There's so many lies coming out about that. So many lies coming out about Democrats are trying to kill him. Look, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but just I have to mention it now. When he said Democrats are trying to kill him, the first guy was a Republican. The second guy was all over the place, but voting for him in 2016, well, I mean, it's his own people. It's not Democrats. It's his own people. So, I don't know what the madness is. Let's finish on with this hurricane, though. This is another meteorologist, when I mentioned the dirty side of the storm in Katrina, explaining in detail what this storm might be like and comparing it, in comparison, I should say, to Katrina. Here it is.
Then as we get to Wednesday, there is a potential that the storm weakens just a bit, down to Category 3 status with winds at 120 miles per hour on approach to the Florida West Coast. That's not going to matter in the grand scheme of the impacts that Florida will see. And here's the reason why. We've got at least 24 hours where this storm is forecast to be a Category 4 storm. That means 24 hours of the ocean waves in the Gulf of Mexico building and building and building. Once that storm loses the intensity, those waves aren't just going to diminish. They stay at that level. So even though it's a Category 3 storm potentially at landfall, the storm surge will likely be Category 4 level. So please, if you live along the Florida West Coast, if you're in a storm surge prone area, or if you have friends or family that are, let them know that. Let them know that, hey, don't let your guard down just because the storm's weakening on approach to the coast. Think about Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina was a Category 5 hurricane in the Gulf and then weakened to Category 3 status before landfall. Not much help there, right? Katrina obviously doing devastating damage to New Orleans, and we could see devastating storm surge to areas from Tampa Bay to Southwest Florida as we get to Wednesday afternoon and Wednesday evening as the storm approaches from the south and west.
Not to mention, Brian, these people have already had the shit kicked out of them from a storm that just happened.
Yeah. It's unimaginable. I can't even begin to fathom what these people are going through. And that's why that last video the first clip that you played, you have somebody that's breaking down. I mean, because these people understand what's coming. And this is horrible. They're going to lose, the loss of life is obviously number one priority. You want to make sure that people get out of there. People have an opportunity to save their own lives, but at the same time, losing everything. They're losing their homes. They're losing their vehicles. They're losing all their property. They have nothing. And, one after another. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. My thoughts and prayers go out to these people. I'm not sure what else can be done.
Well, absolutely. Listen, I hope on your radio show, I'm not sure if you're covering this, you're probably covering the politics of it, but anybody in the sound of my voice, anybody who hears this, on YouTube, on Apple, iHeart, Spotify, wherever we are, you got to get out. Look, this is what Senator Marco Rubio put up. This is a tweet that he put up that showed the devastation of the hurricane. And he said, as of this morning, all models are converging on the same path. This storm is not going to turn away at the last minute. If you live in an evacuation zone, the time to leave as soon as you can. Do not wait for the last minute. Everyone wants to stay with their homes usually. Trust me, I know. I grew up with hurricanes all the time in Louisiana. Nobody wants to leave. And many times people escape it. The thing is that it only takes one time for you not to escape it, and then you're gone. So Marco Rubio, I don't give him a lot of credit, but right now I'll have to give him credit for a tweet. At least a tweet. But Ron DeSantis is refusing to take the Biden-Harris phone calls because he's refusing to cooperate with them. This is Karine Jean-Pierre at the White House briefing responding to that, and then Brian and I are going to talk about it. Here it is.
DeSantis refused to take a call from Vice President Harris specifically around Hurricane Milton. Can you just talk about that and any communication around this new hurricane?
Look, that is something for the governor to speak to himself. If you have the president and you have the vice president reaching out to offer up assistance provided to your constituents, the people who live in your state, to make sure we are doing everything that we need to do from a federal response, and we're reaching out, offering our support. That's for the governor. The governor it's up to him if he wants to respond to us or not. But what we're doing is we're working with state and local officials to make sure that we are pre-positioned, to make sure that we are ready to be there for the communities that are going to be impacted. We are doing the job that is needed, that we believe is needed to protect the communities and to make sure that they have everything that is needed. You heard me talk about the declaration. We approved that for Florida. That's moving forward. And so we're taking this very, very seriously. That's for the governor to speak to. That is.
Trump and some of his.
Brian, why?
Absolutely despicable. Well, I'll tell you why, because Ron DeSantis one day wants to be the president of the United States. Do you remember when Chris Christie shook the hand of Barack Obama, thanking him for funds? Do you remember
he never recovered from that?
That was going to be my point, Don. You're absolutely right. He never recovered from that. But, you know, Chris Christie did the right thing back then. He shook the president's hand. He thanked him for relief, saving lives. That's what this should be all about. Ron DeSantis, this is not about saving lives. This is about his political future. And sadly, he knows with the base of his supporters right now, our MAGA supporters, let's be honest about that, that if he takes those phone calls and he's getting into a situation where maybe he shakes the hand of the vice president or Joe Biden, it will hurt him politically. And so many of these politicians, sadly, care more about their political future than their own people. That's why, Don.
Oh, look, I knew the answer, but I was hoping maybe you had another one. Like maybe he's too busy. I'm sure he is busy, but still, you know what I'm saying. In the meantime, we've been talking about all of this, the misinformation and deliberate misinformation and lies, especially by the MAGA folks. Donald Trump, his family up on that stage this past weekend, talking about, the horrible response from Kamala Harris and Biden and FEMA, and on and on and on. This is actually what actual governors in the region have been saying about the response.
So this is a great team effort, and I assure you it's going to be done, but this is one that is going to take a lot of patience. We got the team, we have the equipment, the federal government is helping us well, they're embedded with us, and there's no asset out there that we have not already accessed.
I'm incredibly appreciative of the rapid response and the cooperation from the federal team at FEMA. I've been on the phone over the weekends with the senior FEMA administrator. The team has been deployed. We had our declaration of emergency processed in an expedited way over the weekend and was finalized yesterday.
Let me ask it this way. As of today, what has been the ongoing kind of federal assistance for South Carolina?
It's been superb. I finally was able to speak to the president yesterday afternoon after he missed me and I missed him leaving. He left a voicemail, I left a voicemail. So we finally connected yesterday afternoon. He said that whatever we need to let him know, and we're doing that. Also, Secretary Buttigieg called yesterday and said the same thing, and also Deanie Creswell for FEMA has also called. So, and a number of the governors have called. So we're getting assistance, and we're asking for everything we need. And fortunately, we have a great team that's got a lot of experience and a lot of vision, and they're able to make full use of all these assets.
We have been coordinating across all fronts. I have to say, pre-positioning all of the resources ahead of the storm was critical. And we were able to do the exact same thing. We have been, Sean, I have to say, working well with FEMA. They, in fact, were moving very quickly over the last few days for us, and getting these resources has been critically important.
So I just spoke, the president just called me yesterday afternoon. I missed him and called him right back. And he just said, hey, what do you need? And I told him, we got what we need. We'll work through the federal process. He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate that.
Do you think that maybe some more?
Okay, so anyway, we get the point. We get the picture. And listen, this was a couple of days ago. Now, I don't know if there is going to be pressure, and as this goes on, because, right now, who knows what the governors are going to say, but so much. Well, I should say it. We know they're still saying that FEMA is doing a good job. If can you guys get me the Pete Buttigieg, please, from this morning, if we have it, and we're going to play that next. But for them to play politics with this, and when you consider the scope of the storm, we're not down there, Brian. And so I know people are hurting, but it takes time for resources to get through. And it's not just the politicians. Pete Buttigieg had to respond to something on Twitter, right? One of the most powerful people in the world with one of the biggest platforms who was spreading misinformation. And Pete Buttigieg took it upon himself to respond on Twitter and then in person, so to speak, on the phone, and then talked about it on Fox News. This is the way you handle it. And this shows you people who are not playing politics, they're actually doing their jobs and they're trying to help, unlike some folks who are trying to spread falsehoods and lies. Here it is.
Saw this. I'm sure a lot of people saw this. You actually personally pushed back against some misinformation about hurricane relief in an exchange with Elon Musk, of all people, on Twitter. We are showing it right there, basically telling him that he could call you if he was confused. Whatever you told him seemed to work, because he publicly thanked you and said you're on the ball, which is not something he typically does. Did you end up speaking with him, or did he just take your word for it online?
No, he took me up on that. He called. We had a conversation. What we found out was actually happening was the FAA was not closing down any airspace, but there was an issue with pilots who were helping get Starlink equipment to where it needed to be, having the right information. We worked that with local authorities, and we're able to take care of it. And I think to me it's an example of how often the best thing to do is just to pick up the phone. I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but since there has been some confusion and even misinformation about the FAA's temporary flight restrictions, I should probably explain how it works. This is a process that has been in place for decades, and basically what happens is if you have a disaster area, there's a lot of rescue operations going on. A local airport or fire department or the Coast Guard flying helicopters, somebody like that, can request what's called a TFR. It doesn't shut down the airspace, but it increases the level of coordination that goes on because you want to make sure that that airspace is safe and that you prevent the risk of collisions. And so when you hear that term, that's what's going on. Again, I don't mean to get that technical, but I've been amazed at how a little kernel of some detail gets blown up on the internet into something that it's not. And some of what I've seen going on around what the FAA does to coordinate and facilitate rescue flights, including, a lot of good Samaritans who are out there as civilians helping because they have pilot's licenses. And that's a great thing. It's just important that they coordinate and make sure that it's safe.
Yeah, they don't want airplanes. Basically, they don't want airplanes and helicopters bumping into each other out there. Again, I don't understand it. Why people feel that they have to rush to judgment about these things. And is this another example of just owning the libs rather than looking out for the people who actually need the help?
Absolutely. And I think that's what's most upsetting about this, Don, is that there are people out there that need help. And sadly, some people that might be ill-informed on what Pete Buttigieg just referred to, and they'll blame Democrats. Let's remember, this could also incite violence. I mean, imagine if you're somebody who has lost a loved one, somebody who's lost your home, and you're ill-informed, and you're hearing all of the right-wing rhetoric blaming Democrats, blaming Joe Biden, blaming Kamala Harris. They don't care about you. They don't care about your families. It could incite violence. And then who do you blame? Who do you blame for all this stuff? Pete Buttigieg is an extremely intelligent, extremely well-spoken guy, and he's stating the facts. Unfortunately, Don, not enough people are going to be able to hear that, or maybe even believe it, because they listen to every single word that Donald Trump speaks as truth. Pete Buttigieg is a good man. I think he needs to do more interviews like that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation out there, but I'm not surprised. It's coming from the same place it came back with the election denying stuff and the dogs and cats, coming from the same place. And it's going to continue even after this next hurricane hits, sadly.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure you hit the like button. It helps us with the algorithm. And also, we'd love for you to become a subscriber. So hit that button, too. We're live every day at 10 a.m. Eastern Time and 5 p.m. Eastern, so there's plenty of content for you to check out.